Holy cow. Alright, guys, this has been the weirdest entry of a thing ever. Hopefully we are live now. I'm seeing myself on the echoed stream, and holy cow. Alright then. Oh man, oh man. Alright, well I guess we have to try that one over again. Alright guys, hi, I'm your host Pete Bickford. Welcome to the ComicBase live stream with special extra studio glitches. Picture now but no sound? Are we seriously having no sound? Good grief. Alright, I'm at levels. Do we have sound now? Sound? Anybody? So right now I'm showing sound off the freaking charts. Alright, how are we doing? Do we have sound? No? Alright. Well. Okay, guys. How we doing? We have sound or not? Waiting for response from the admin. Alright. If you are in the chat right now, please let me know, do you have sound? Because I'm seeing levels going out. I'm almost seeing dangerously high levels going out. Wow. Guys, I may have to start the stream over. This is terrible. Chat says you have sound. Okay, man. This is crazy. This has been more weirdness from YouTube today than we've ever had. Alright, I'm going to continue on and hope that we're okay. Welcome everyone to the chat. Let's save time, pretend I've already welcomed everyone here and gotten onto things. Oh my goodness gracious. And also welcome to our new admin, Greg, who's got the wrench timeout. And I don't know what we're doing that caused everything to go completely kerflooey today. But anyway, this is going to be a special, mostly questions live stream. I had some news. I'm going to shorten it up because I already said it and I'll put it out in some other way about barcode scanners and things like that. A short version, if you have one of our ancient Manhattan barcode scanners and you're having trouble scanning the codes that are created by the latest ComicBase, please get in touch with me over the chat or send a note to, and let me put up the lower third on that one. Pete Bickford at human-computing.com. Send me a note, say, hey, got an old barcode scanner, need a test version. Because what's happening here is the scanners that we sold about a decade ago don't work with a new barcodes type called CodaBar that we introduced a year or two ago with ComicBase 2020. And they're basically, the default is they're dropping the front and back characters. Now, we have a software workaround that will make things better, at least for your comic books. If you need that, let us know. A better way to go is if you have the full version of the manual, and I unfortunately have to say we no longer do for that particular scanner, because we have no samples of that anywhere in the office anywhere. But if you still have that one, look through and see if you have any options on CodaBar which transmit the whole thing. Apparently it's not the default for the scanner. But if you can't find that, reach out to me, and I think we can at least make the default in ComicBase be a little friendlier to scanners that aren't working properly on that. A better solution would also be get a better scanner, or at least a newer one. We cannot immediately help you on that because we're dealing with supply chain problems, as is our vendor back where we're sourcing from, and we're delayed getting scanners ourselves. So if you do have that scanner, reach out, and I'll put the note up there one last time, and then we'll take it from there. All right, Greg says he has sound now, so I'm gonna press on because this has been weird. All right, the admin says the one without sound. All right. All right. All right, guys. And Greg warns, I have Galactus powers in the chat. Be everyone. All right. Okay, so things I want to talk about real quickly. By the way, the unknown virus of unspecified origin has been laying waste to our California crew. So a few things that wanted to be done this week are not being done because I'm trying to double for a lot of people's jobs right now. We have a small company, and when you knock out a person or two with an unknown virus of unspecified origin for a while, it throws a lot of work onto the rest of us. So we're running behind on a couple things that we plan to have ready for this week, but we'll take it from there. One thing that we do have ready is we just pushed the new 4K images up to the web servers. So if you have a 4K Blu-ray and for some reason you want to download all 798,000 or so images at once, I'm thinking of certain people. If you want to, they should be up there now and downloadable. All the rest of you, if you've been using Sidekick or downloading the images as you've gone along, nothing to worry about, you're already current. But that has been done. Also want to say we got over 28,000 data submissions over the weekend. Thank you so much to everyone, Fred and everyone else who's been sending all that in. You've been keeping us busy, I will definitely say that. But once we get through and deal with all that, we'll have blown past the 800,000 image mark. We will be coming close to, getting to the point where you almost want to say 1 million comic books, and of course well over 100,000 magazines and books and things like that in the database. So anyway, thank you everyone who submitted data. Really appreciate it, and couldn't do it without you. But man, you guys are busy. All right. Moving on, let's see where we're at on the chat. All right, Richard, can you give me a little bit more detail about the placeholder image thing that you're referring to? I could think about 3 different ways to go with that, but I want to make sure I'm answering the right question. All right, and let's see. Yes, and we have a get well soon wish from everyone here. All right, other things that are going on here. Yeah, I just want to say a quick thing. There's, just before we get down to questions, I don't know, I'm from Tennessee, I work in the comic industry, so just like I felt at one point like I had to write U.S. News and World Review, where they'd written a long article where they had not capitalized the M in Spider-Man, I felt obliged to actually write a letter as like a teenager to them and say, hey, we make a giant database of comic books. If you ever need, help on such weighty matters as whether the M in Spider-Man is both hyphenated and capitalized, spoiler, it is, feel free to look us up. We'll be your guys. Anyway, there is currently an international controversy going on around, if you were to believe the headlines of virtually everyone who's reported on it, that evil McMinn County in rural Tennessee has banned the Pulitzer Prize winning Mouse, which is great graphic novel by Art Spiegelman. It's a Holocaust memoir where he basically took the Jews as mice, portrayed them as mice, the Nazis as cats, and told a quite gripping and sometimes quite graphic story of his parents' remembrances of going through the camps. Now, if you, again, were to believe the international outrage over this thing, this placers, they're banning a Pulitzer Prizing Holocaust memoir. Don't they want people to know history? It's a fake story. Really, all that really happened is there's, a scene in this thing where, not only is, few rough words, but more importantly, there's a point where, like, the mouse that was meant to represent Spiegelman's mother is shown bleeding out from her gut and committing suicide, and the people in McMinn County, which is a little place I'd have a hard time finding on the map, said, someone raised an objection at the school board and said, don't you think it's a little rough for 8th graders? And they said, yeah, it's a little rough. We'll find another book, and so it got dropped from the reading list. It's still in the school library. You can still check it out. Honestly, this is the kind of thing where, like, if I were going to organize a play, a way to get Mouse back on the graphic sales charts, this would be exactly the sort of rumor I would spread. But the whole thing is, guys, it's a non-story. They didn't ban anything. They just took it off the required reading list. You can still get it in the library. And honestly, if you haven't read it before, it's worth reading. But, not all 8th graders are the same. I'm sure your 8th graders are incredibly mature and would never be traumatized by seeing something like this. But, some people thought that their 8th graders would. They're the parents. Yeah, totally get it. And honestly, the stuff that flies back where I used to come from in San Francisco would not, fly in other places, but this is not a book ban, for goodness sake. We have actual censorship going on in the world, including, the White House press secretary, talking about how she's, trying to correlate with, cooperate with news networks to drive more positive messaging about the administration, while at the same time, suppressing disinformation and wants big tech to step in more. Guys, there's real stuff you ought to be worried about. This is a fake story. Again, nothing got banned. They got taken off the required list. Big deal. All right, end of story. Moving on. Okay, let's see here. Where are we doing out here? So, placeholder images in ComicBase without UPC info wasn't able to clear the placeholder. Gosh, Russia, I'm gonna need more detail. I'm not sure if I'm fully up to speed on the issue you're bringing up. Sorry about that. All right, so Ed has a question. Need reports to find 35-cent variants, CPVs, DC logo variants in ComicBase, whether they have a copy or not. Hope to avoid going through the entire collection to locate them as needed. So, if I'm understanding the question, you'd like to be able to find, say, 35-cent variants. I'm not sure what a CPV is, so maybe you can give me more on that one. DC logo variant. I would start by just doing a find on the notes field. So if you just do, let's go over to the ComicBase screen. So if you were just to say Control F, let's go ahead and pull that up. If I say find, and then go, let's go under item fields, go to notes, right there, and then say contains, DC logo, right? Presumably it should find you all the DC logo variants, or if you say something like 35-cent, something like that, it should find you anything that has a note that talks about being a 35-cent variant. Typically all that stuff in the database, as much as we index it, we tend to note that stuff redundantly in the notes, because what'll typically happen is there'll be like an issue 293 and a 293A, and we have to explain what the 293A is, and so either in the item field, item notes, or the notes field, you'll see a thing that says something like 35-cent variant or a regional variant. I say start from there, because that's going to bring up a list, and you can always, once you've got a report on anything like that, you can then highlight anything in the main window over here, right click, and then say quick report, and it will give you a quick report of those items, which you then can print out and send to different places. Let me bring that onto the main screen so that people can see that. Yeah, go with that. I don't, let me know if that works out for you. If we need to do something more, we'll look into it. Let's see. Yeah, and Fred said, yeah, it had been required reading. Yeah, it was on. Someone thought it was a great book for the Holocaust, which I'm not disagreeing with. The real question is just, was it age appropriate for 8th graders? I mean, like high schoolers, absolutely. 8th graders, not so much. All right, so let's see. Fred says, Softball Stars, does a regular cover issue need an item description label of regular cover? I'm gonna say doesn't hurt. I'd say, look, for when we were in normal times and most comics were just the regular issue, I don't want to see Captain America 100 through 293 also a regular cover. That doesn't help anyone, because of course they're regular covers. But I'd say when you have a variant situation, I do think it helps if you say regular cover and then describe the cover. So don't just say it's the regular cover. Yeah, that's what not having a variant means. But on the other hand, if you say it's the Carlos Mangual cover, preferably the regular Carlos Mangual cover parenthesis woman standing atop mountain, something. I mean, anything where you can figure out without seeing the picture what book you're looking at. I always love that description the best. But I'm not going to say don't do it. But yeah, definitely do go ahead and say regular cover, but give us more than that. Give us regular cover by somebody with something that would help you identify what made it the regular one. And Ed says CPV equals Canadian price variant. Typically, I believe we hit this one beforehand. Typically, if it's only marked as Canadian price variance, it'll be spun out as its own title. But if I guess if there are ones that are you know, like for instance, my recollection is, for instance, like if you go to a series like I don't know, you know, Bugs Bunny. The Whitman ones will be called out in the notes as Whitman versions. The Canadian price versions or things like that, you know, are typically spun into their own titles. Regional prices, on the other hand, sometimes they'll try like a 35-cent version if they're not sure they can get away with the price increase without losing their audience. Those will typically be run within the main title, in which case you'll be found under the notes. All right. Let's see. And let's see. Okay, what do we have here about advanced search? Oh, Greg has a good point here. There's a thread in the ComicBase message boards about advanced search. If you're having issues with advanced search scripts, it's a great place to go for help. Absolutely. Especially there's a guy named, a lot of people have helped out on this, but a guy named Stealth DBA, his name's Steve. Great resource to the ComicBase community. It's just yeoman's work as far as helping people find weird ways of finding weird, you know, just stuff. He used to be a database administrator, and he is using some of that great skills to help people work up, you know, extra searches that, you know, make complicated things very easy using the program. So, yeah, definitely have a look under that message board thread. All right, moving on. Let's see here. I've had questions about, yes, a question some people sent me about performance issues when you start up ComicBase. The question came in basically, it's like, yeah, I'm running, you know, ComicBase on a not particularly high-spec computer, but it's taking like 4 minutes to load. It's like, you know, is that normal? And the answer, no, that is not normal. On a computer with a decent processor and SSD, 3 to 4 seconds to load is what you're looking for. If it's taken much more than that, something went weird. And so I want to give a couple tips on how to find out what, you know, is possibly going on. Now, first thing you gotta wonder about is the problem ComicBase or is the problem something about your machine? Now, the fact that everything else on your machine runs fast, not necessarily a great, you know, clue, because databases like ComicBase stress your machine in different ways than, say, Microsoft Word does or a web browser. The main thing that they stress in particular is disk. You know, if you ever want to make ComicBase run 2, 3, 4 times as fast as it does before, make sure that your next computer has a solid-state disk drive, because databases they're all about the disk, because they are constantly loading off and so forth, and just if you can make your disk faster, the whole database is going to go better. But anyway, when you have really extensive load times, one of two things is typically going on. So let's talk about the ComicBase thing first of all. One thing that could be happening is, well, two things could be happening. One is you might have parked yourself on an incredibly long title the last time you left the program. So if I go here, you know, and I go to, I don't know, Transformers by Atari or Australian version, things like that, you know, talking about Canadian price versions, here's the Canadian version of Transformers, right? You know, things like this, you know, you saw how fast that loads. You know, it basically, it's as fast as I can click, you know, it's got the next title up, right? But if I park myself on Action Comics, that's a trickier deal, right? Because Action Comics is over 1,000 issues. Worst case is you park yourself on something like the British Medical Journal or Time Magazine. Those things, if that was the last title you were working on, it might take 30, 40, 50 seconds to load that title the first time, because the very first time it has to draw this graph, it does a whole lot of formatting, setup, and things like that. And if it's doing that with something that has 5,000 entries in it, it's going to be a lot slower than if it has 50 entries in it. So, to the extent that's possible, don't park yourself on really, really long titles, or better yet, play a little bit of a balancing game on the preferences here of how many items you load into your grid view. So for instance, I've got mine set to load 2,000 items max into my grid view, which is more than enough for almost any comic title ever published on the planet. For that matter, 500 is almost enough for almost every comic book. But 1,000, 2,000, those are good numbers. Do not say 100,000 unless you just have a ginormous computer with crazy amounts of memory. As a practical matter, I would probably, as an upper limit, choose 5,000. Don't go nuts on this one, because again, you can get into situations where you're asking it to load and format just enormous lists, and if that's the first title you're going to in particular, it's gonna be kind of slow. So I'd say set this preference to something reasonable. work from there. And if you quit for the day, if you're not parked on the longest title in the entire database, that's a help. Now that's if it's a comic-based thing. Now there's one other thing it could be. If you are getting really slow load times in ComicBase, is there could be some damage in your database. Unlikely, but could be. One thing that you can do to help diagnose that is if you hold down the control key when you launch ComicBase and keep it held down as you're launching, you'll eventually get to a note saying, first of all, it'll go and it'll check all the fields and database, database structure and so forth to make sure that everything's up to date and you don't need to have anything patched up. The other thing it'll do is if you keep it held down is it'll ask you, do you want to rebuild all the database indexes? Go ahead and say yes. It'll take a couple minutes to do that. It'll essentially re-index all the indexable fields in the database, which means it just kind of puts everything out in a nice, clean, neat order. And then if you then go, and I'll switch over to the other screen here, finally, and say, go to your File Tools, which again is always starts up on the wrong screen, say Optimize Database, and let it go through and optimize your database after that. It'll shrink down the size of it. Everything will be stored in optimal order. And 99 times out of 100, if there's anything wrong with your actual database, that's going to set it to rights by the time that's done. Now, if that isn't, if you do all that and it doesn't fix your problem, then the problem is going to be somewhere with your computer. Now, it could be a disk thing, it could be a number of other things. Realistically, what it probably is you probably have an issue with your antivirus software going nuts on you. What I would suggest is temporarily turn off your antivirus. And if a lot of times the antivirus software will have a option that says, take 5, take, a timeout for 10 minutes, whatever the thing is. Try that, but if you don't feel like it's really listening to you, and one way to find out if it's really listening to you or not is if you go under the Task Manager, which you can get to, just go under here, type Task, MGR, and you'll see this is the secret list of everything that's going on your machine at any given moment. So I've got 17 apps open in one state or another, things I'm running right now. But the weird thing is you'll also see I have 174 background processes on right now that are going in the background doing little things. And you'll see as you're doing this, what's eating up all your computer's time. Now, at the moment, nothing much is eating up my computer's time. 8% CPU load is nothing, so I'm good. But if you find out as you're doing this one that even though I turned off my antivirus software, that I see a whole bunch of hungry processes here that all say like McAfee or Norton or things like that, and they're consuming 20% of my CPU load as they go, at that point, maybe consider just temporarily uninstalling McAfee, Norton, whatever you're using as web stuff, and seeing if your life doesn't get better. Because when that happens, antivirus software, I have some sympathy for the guys who make it in that they are engaged in an arms race against the bad guys. That being said, it's too often that the people who are supposedly there to keep you safe from the bad guys are using so much of your computer's resources that it's as bad as having a virus itself. So, tell your antivirus software, turn yourself off for 5-10 minutes, see if the problem goes away. If that doesn't work though, and if you see that your computer's still loaded down, actually go and uninstall your antivirus software. And if the problem goes away, consider a different antivirus software would be my advice on that one. And then finally, if that's really still having trouble with the whole thing, it might be time to send your computer into Best Buy and see if you don't have a hardware issue going on. Anyway, that's kind of the sum total of the things I would look into if you're having really bad startup issues with ComicBase. Normal startup, I'll put it this way, we had to discontinue the opening overture music in ComicBase. We used to have like a boom, when you launched the program. We had to discontinue that because when people started getting SSDs, solid-state disk drives, ComicBase was launching and ready to roll before the music was done. And so it was kind of stupid because the music was really there to kind of distract you for a couple seconds while it was opening and doing its thing. So we cut it out, we left out the overture at the beginning because it wasn't needed anymore. So ComicBase really ought to be opening that fast on your machine. If it's not, look to a cause. All right, let's see here. Fred says, let's see if I'm following the thread properly. So entries that have multiple variants with item description, a variant cover, even though they have different UPCR covers. Yeah, if we have a variant, and I saw some of yours come in on the submissions, you know, it really helps if you say something different than just variant cover. You know, it really helps if you say, like, you know, Carlos Pacheco variant cover, or, you know, variant cover with red logo and, you know, and woman holding sword. You know, something that would let me actually tell what cover I'm staring at. Saying variant is not super helpful unless there's literally one cover that says regular cover and the other cover says variant, and that's it. Which, yeah, back in the old days, that actually would happen, but not so much these days. So when you say variant, yeah, try to describe the variant. Same thing goes if you say regular. If, you know, it's either completely redundant, right? So, I mean, if there only was a regular cover, then you don't need to say regular cover. But if there is a regular, like this is the primary cover, say what the cover was. You know, say this, you know, again, you know, say this is the George Perez cover, or, you know, Alex Ross, or whoever did it, and then the variant cover will be by somebody else. So that way, if I'm holding one or I'm holding the other, I'll know which one I'm looking at. That's the goal. Yes, and absolutely, Fred. Please augment your things with descriptions. All right, so let's see here. Rebuild pop-up prompts. Fred also wanted to point out that if you say rebuild all lists, you sometimes get rid of some pop-up prompts. Yeah, so let's talk about that just for a minute. So under your file menu, if you go to File Tools, go bring it over here. There's the second item down here is called Rebuild Lists, and what that does is all these things basically recalculate stuff that's in the database. The series information, it takes things like, you know, like the name of the Transformers title over here is really Transformers, the. You know, it actually computes the Transformers out of that. But it also verifies things like that the publisher date ranges make sense and does things like that. The list of owned issues computes, you know, like for instance, it goes down every title and says, have you got anything on this issue? And if so, it marks as in stock as opposed to not out, you know, in stock. The real key one here, the one that you'll keep going back to over here, is item information. If you say rebuild on this one, it'll go to every item in your database. So all million or so entries at this point. It'll validate that the dates are valid dates. It will go through the notes and try to get rid of anything that's completely redundant. So if you type 1ST appearance of, you know, Deathlock, followed by first, FIRST, appearance of Deathlock, it's going to choose one of them and get rid of the other. It will also move things that refer to the cover or to the variant of the whole thing out of your notes field and into the item description field, because that's where those things properly belong these days. It will try to validate appearances and whatnot, but yeah, it'll go and reindex everything that has to do with the title itself. It will also rebuild certain totals, like there are totals that get used in our reports for instance, you know, if you want to know your collection's value, it will be calculating out the total number of issues. If I've got 3 copies of a given issue that's worth $10, it has a field called extended value, which is, you know, 3 times 10, and that's that. The same thing goes for extended price, extended cost, you know, validates conditions, so forth. It does a lot of cleanup work, but it shouldn't do anything destructive. So all these things should be pretty safe. Over here, the list of contributors, storylines, and notes, what that one is all about is that's the one where it goes through and recomputes all the creator credit indexes. So it goes through all the writers, artists, translators, introductions, etc., figures out whether this name's been used before or not, and adds it to the list if so. So that one's a good one to do if you're not seeing those things popping up under your find lists as you would expect. And then finally, the last one under here is rebuilding the pictures list. Now, this one doesn't recompute all the thumbnails. Some people thought it did. It does not. It's not meant to. What it does do is it goes to every item in the database, finds whether it's got a picture, and if it has a picture, figures out how big that picture is. So that way it knows whether or not you need to automatically, you know, when you download you know, new updates and so forth, it knows whether or not it wants to download a bigger picture of that one or so forth. So if you're having any issues with picture downloading or anything like that, yeah, it's worth, you know, this one takes, you know, an hour or so, but it's worth, you know, doing this if you feel like your pictures aren't, you know, being pulled down properly. But anyway, that's the cleanup options on there. But yeah, doing a rebuild of your list, especially if you're getting any kind of notes about saying you've got a bad date or something like that and the whole thing, yeah, it's not a bad idea to do. All right. Let's see here. Anything else for ComicBase T? New database issue. 4970. Hit enter, it saves, and back to issue number 1 at best. It's F3 4978 to get back to where I was. Anyway, please default to the last issue worked on. That's a, that's a good, idea. Yeah, let me think on that one. It seems like a completely valid a completely valid suggestion. So let me see if there's a way to make that happen. All right, let me see here. ComicBase TV. Fred says there used to be several pop-ups that come from the middle of the process. Time the process hold until you clicked. Yeah, we try to minimize that kind of nonsense these days. If you do get things that stop and make you wait for things while it's going, let us know, because we want those things to run as automatically as possible. But I believe we've done some efforts over the years to try to cut those down. And thumbnails. Question about thumbnails. If you do want to get rid of your thumbnails and blow those away, the way to do that is to go to your thumbnails directory. Let's talk about where that is. If you're looking here under Manage Pictures and Movies, it's going to tell you where your location for Pictures and Movies is in your media folder. Now, this is a special one in the admin one. Don't worry, that's special for us. But you guys will have your Pictures and Movies folders over here under Shared CB Data, and the thumbnails will exist. Wherever that points to on your machine, it's going to take you to it's going to take you to a folder. Let me pull up that folder, the default folder on my machine. I can show you where that is. See, users. All right, let's go ahead and put that over here. So by default, your pictures are going to get installed in the public users folder. So my computer is called Adventure. So on my C drive, under users, there's a user called public. And then under public is public documents. And in there is going to be a human computing folder. And by default, this is where it's going to keep all your movies, your pictures, your media, logos, flags, animations, all the kind of stuff that ComicBase uses. If you ever want to get rid of your thumbnails and have it rebuild them, you can go to the thumbnail directory, and if you want, just nuke the whole thing, because they'll rebuild themselves. It's not a problem. It's not the worst thing you could do. These are all the thumbnails which are cached for different sizes. These are really no different than the icon cache files in Windows, if you know what those are. But yeah, no, go ahead and nuke them if you want. They will rebuild. The only thing that'll happen is the very first time you go to a new title after that, it's going to be a little bit slower, because it'll have to regenerate those thumbnails again. But anyway, should you ever feel a need to rebuild your thumbnails, that's where you'd go to do it. All right, let's see here. Okay. Fred says, yes, item number 6 of 33 out of my ComicBase pet peeves. I guess if you want to send me the whole list, I'd be curious what those are. All right, let's see how we're doing for time, because I managed to burn a lot of it at the beginning with somehow we weren't streaming properly. So let's move on. All right, price checks. We had a question come in about price checks. So this is an interesting one out here. So let's say I'm looking at Transformers number 1, and it's currently got a value of $95. Let's say I'm aggressively selling on eBay, and I know that I can get $150 for this thing. I just know it. Now the prices in ComicBase are based on just sales and listings, which we can verify of that particular issue. There's about 2.1 million, I believe, at this point, data items that we're going through every week that we grind to figure out what's the rolling average of this issue. But there's bound to be at any given moment times when you say, look, no, I know this is wrong. We talked about this a couple live streams ago, where the question was, a question came up about certain really, really expensive Golden Age issues. So for instance, Action Comics number 1, there's reason to believe, based on the sales of Superman 1 recently, that Action Comics number 1 in near mint maybe is a $5 to $6 million comic. And that's something that we honestly, because near mint copies of Action number 1 don't come up every day, you know, you have to kind of set those ones as you see data, but the data is starting to coalesce around the idea that a comic book, even though I believe it's currently at 3 million and change right now in the database, is probably significantly undervalued given the current comic market. So I mean, we don't. That's one that, you know, you can actually. I think it's fair to say Action Comics #1. No, based on this, that, and the other thing, I think it bears an adjustment. Same thing goes with certain sales we've seen of, say, Amazing Fantasy 15 or Spider-Man #1, Superman #1, so forth. The comic market has been absolutely crazy, and sometimes there isn't enough market data to move it where it needs to go as fast as it needs to go. What Price Check does is it tells our editors, if you basically, let me show you how you do it, is you highlight the issue in question, right-click on it, and say Request Price Check. And what that's going to do is it's going to pull up a thing saying, look, all right, it's currently 95 bucks. How much do you think it's worth? And you can say, I think it's worth 150. And then this is the important part. Why? And now, the thing we don't want to have is we don't want to have you say, yeah, because I saw it in Overstreet, or yeah, I saw it in some price guide somewhere. That's no good. That's, you know, first of all, we can't use it due to copyright. But we want to have raw data that tells us why. We don't want to just, you know, have an opinion. So if you say, look, you know, here's an auction listing on eBay, here's an auction, completion thing from Comic Connect or something, which tells me that the price should be higher. That's valid data that we will absolutely look at. And so what that does is it causes us to have a conversation at our place amongst our editors, to say, look, all right, let's take a manual adjust on this thing. You know, so maybe the automatic metrics we're using for pricing aren't doing enough of it. You know, maybe there isn't enough data, or the data is so outside the norm that we need to take a manual approach on this particular issue. And so that tells us to kind of key the whole thing in. Now, many of these ones we'll adjust it. We'll take the thing, you know, under advisement, and we'll find, you know, things which either correlates your story or which, you know, kind of doesn't. There was one that came up this weekend on I want to say was it Mortal Kombat. First of all, it definitely, and I mean no offense to whoever sent this one in, if you send in a price check, please put it on an item that's actually in the database. Don't create the item and then price check it, because we don't know what the heck you're talking about. I remember we spent some time on this one just because we were talking about a Mortal Kombat Special Edition #1, and we're like, that doesn't exist. What did exist was, and this was confusing, so I mean, I don't blame the person for putting it this way. So if you went to Mortal Kombat, if you look at the cover for #1, it's it's a collector's item on this one. On the B one, yeah, they called it Special Edition. This is the same issue. You know, it's just they put different cover foo on the top. You know, I guess they called it a collector's item on this one. They called it Special Edition on this variant. But these are all just variants of exactly the same comic book. Anyway, so on this one, the guy had seen some eBay sales, which, you know, they managed to sell for quite a lot of money. Realistically, I think the price wound up moving on it a bit, but it didn't move anywhere near as fast as far as the guy had thought it should have gone in the end. Once we looked at it, because there were, you know, probably 20 other copies he could have easily bought for a third of the price that it just went for on eBay. I think the fact that it was misclassified probably, you know, caused a fair amount of the confusion. But yeah, we're not always going to go along with you if you request a price check, but we are certainly going to look into it. So yeah, if you ever see something that you feel is out of line in the database pricing, call it out to us. You know, we want to know, and we will take a look. But yeah, the vast majority of the pricing in ComicBase is not done that way. The normal way is we simply grind the market, and we look at stuff that actually sold and that actually is for sale, and we try to our best as we can to compute a rolling average. But yeah, weird things happen, so we want to know when that does. All right, let's take a look at the chat and see how we're doing. All right, Fred asks, speaking of speed things up, how about adding a ComicBase mobile and scan item batch mode? Maybe. The problem with the mobile app. All right, so the mobile app is pretty neat in that what it does is it lets you look at your collection on any kind of mobile device. Android, iOS, tablet, phone, smart TV, whatever you like. it lets you, lets you look at stuff. It'll let you look things up. It'll even look at overall collection stats and reports. And recently, if you go and scan in a comic on the whole thing, if you've got that in your collection, it'll actually tell you right there. You don't have to have a report saved up to wade through to find out. So that part's pretty good. And if you are scanning a new comic book, let's say you went to the comic show and you're trying to, scan a couple of new purchases you've got in. At the bottom, you can scroll down after you see the data on that comic book that you pulled up, and you can say, yeah, I just bought this. I have one copy. It cost me, $30, and I want to add it in very fine condition. Go. It will then, set that up to be queued in to be added to your collection the next time you sit down at the database. Now, realistically, you can, well, first of all, you can do that by either typing in the title and issue. You can do it by scanning its barcode if you want. I mean, that part is all well and good, but I feel like we ought to keep the expectations realistic about what this guy's going to do as opposed to what your computer's going to do, or for that matter, what a barcode scanner is going to do. One thing in particular that we even include this one as a tip in the program, if you have long progress bars, it now shows you tips to help you use the program better, is scanning barcodes on phones is cool when you're doing it like 1 or 2 times. If you have to do a bunch of them, it sucks. And it doesn't matter whose barcode scanner you're using. It's just, what's happening is on a phone, just because you're lining up, in this case, like a 14 megapixel optical sensor, and you're trying to wait for an image to stabilize, and you have all different focal lengths, and you're doing all these crazy things to try to get an image, which then gets translated down into a 1D barcode scanner, which then gets transmitted up and recognized and so forth. There's so much image processing going on that it just winds up being much, much slower doing that, as opposed to simply picking up a barcode scanner, pointing the laser at a barcode, and just in a quarter of a second, it knows what that barcode is. So I would always say, look, for casual use, yeah, go ahead and use the app for entering things. For batch use, I would never do it. I would never use anyone's photo-based barcode scanner for that, because it, like I say, doing this kind of stuff to try to hold your hand from shaking and and line everything up, that just sucks. Just going tuk 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 with a barcode scanner, way better. So yeah, in a way, I almost don't want to line up the mobile app to pretend it's something it isn't. Because batching works really well when you've got a fair amount of screen space to work with, so you can actually show, here I'm queuing up the batch, or I'm doing things I don't need to scroll in between and do stuff like that. When you have to support everything from a tablet to a phone to a whatever else, man, it's hard to do. And like I say, I almost feel like it sets the wrong expectation for what you should be doing with the program. And so I feel like I don't know a way to win it for all cases, so I almost feel like I'd rather not hang the temptation out there, I guess, is my initial reaction on that. But maybe there's some slick way that we can make it better, without setting that up too bad. But I guess that's my initial worry on that particular question. All right, let's see how else we're doing. Yeah, and if I understand, you're talking about the workflow on that one. But yeah, I would say if you're trying to enter 20, 30, 100 in a row, don't do it on the phone. I just wouldn't. All right, so let's see here. Filter the form for your post. All right, so let's see here. Okay. All right, so moving on to other things. What else were the other ones? God, oh man, we're getting close to time. All right, so let's do this. There's one thing I promised I would address on the live stream, and I wanted to make sure I did that. So give me just a second to check where we're at, and sorry, because this is one thing I know I did not copy to my show notes before the show, and that is my fault. Okay, expiration dates. Price checks we handled. Okay, cool. Yeah, got this question, and it's a funny one, and it's not a funny one. Basically comes down to this, is that, yeah, when you're down to your last couple weeks of using the program, so let me back up a little bit. Whenever you buy ComicBase, we not just we don't just sell you the program with the database and everything else. We also give you a deal where we say, look, and we'll also give you a year of pushing down content updates as we go. So you'll get all the new prices and all the new titles, all the new content that we generate over that whole year, you know, if even the pictures, if you've got an archive subscription. And after that, what we're really hoping is that when that year comes up, two things will happen. One is that we'll prove that the program has a great deal of value and you'll want to renew it. And basically we want to convince you it's the best thing since sliced bread. But if it doesn't, then at that point, then you got to pay for your own renewals. Well, what will happen when you get to the and also when you are getting through the subscription, if we ever issue a program update, so let's say we're at ComicBase 2022 right now, ComicBase 2023 comes out, if your subscription's still active, you get that version of the program free. It's built into the subscription. We do that partially because we're lovely people, we are, but also because we want you to have the latest version of the program, and frankly, we want to be able to say, yeah, we're not going to try to push out updates in a format that we last used in 2011. The backward compatibility just gets to be insane that way. So, if you have the ability to download new program updates, you also have the ability to have the the latest version of the program, and at certain points through the year, you'll actually get a note saying, hey, look, there's a new update out there, but you got to update your program first. Click here to update your program. What that means is please update your program, because you're not going to get anywhere until you do. Anyway, the question that came up, though, other than that, was someone said, look, I'm getting this note saying that my subscription expired. I went to your website, when I renewed the program, but now it's still saying my subscription is about to expire. It's funny, it's easy to overlook, but it I guess bears saying is that if you're getting that situation, it's because you're still using the old version. So if you had been using, say, ComicBase 2021, and you're getting to the end of your subscription, and you'd never downloaded the latest ComicBase when it 2022 when it came out, if you're still using 2021, it's going to expire in a year. So once you've renewed, you'll always get access to the latest version of ComicBase at that point. It'll be right on your registrations page. Always download the latest ComicBase as you go, because your new subscription, the one you just renewed, is going to be tied not to your old serial number, it's your old version of ComicBase. It's going to be tied to your new version of ComicBase. So make sure you download the latest version of ComicBase as when you do the renewal, and then you'll notice that all those messages go away. So yeah, it sounds it sounds obvious, but it's not. And if you were confused by that, you're not alone. We're always trying to make the messaging better on this stuff, but to the extent that we fail, we're always looking for better ways to make it clear. But yes, when you're new to the program, make sure you download the latest version of the program. Don't just keep on using last year's version forever. We definitely want to get you up to the latest thing. All right, I think that's about it for now. Let's do a quick check here. Robot down? Don't know what that means. Okay, expiration dates. Yes, thank you for that. Okay, and I think that is it. All right, guys. Oh, robot. Somebody just fell. No, I'm not sure what that was. I'm broadcasting out of my home here, so every once in a while there's knocks and bumps from other things that go around here. Although Dodger, our dog, has not tried to make a guest appearance on the show. I'm going to try to see if I can get him on at some point. All right, well, guys, I think that'll do it for now. We'll pick this one up next week. Thank you, and as always, there is a forum that Greg runs that on the boards to get program suggestions, also topics for the live stream. Please go ahead and visit that one. Thank you, everyone who weighed in. Sorry for the start difficulties. I wonder what went on with that, but I'm glad we got going in the end. Guys, we'll see